Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Chill Board Podcast, episode 313. My name's Benjamin Yoder, here today to talk to you about video games. It's going to be, I think, maybe a shorter episode this week. I know I say that, and I frequently lie to you, but I only have a few news stories here that I really want to touch on, and they're things that I don't really have a lot to say about. And then after that, I don't really have too much more to say. So I think what I'm going to do at the end of this video, or this podcast, is just give a little progress update on the main featured videos for the website, or the YouTube channel rather. And then I don't really know how that's going to go. I haven't planned that out. So I will say things, but it's going to be about Xeno. So, I don't know how many people listen to the podcast care about Xeno, so I'm going to put that towards the end. So if you want to skip it, you can do that. But we'll do those news stories, and then also we have a Jillian question here as well. But before we get too deep into this, I might sound a little bit different this week. I'm still struggling with some audio issues regarding the YouTube version of the podcast. If you're listening to YouTube and you don't recognize them, cool. If you don't hear them this week and you do usually recognize them, that means this worked. But we'll see. I just was asked by I do my video editing through Sony Vegas. And for some reason, when I'm exporting audio, my voice it has problems with the voice file. And I assume it's due to the audio file I'm using in Vegas. But when I export as an MP3, it's fine. But when I export as an MP4, a video, it's not fine. So I've been trying to navigate that whole process for a long time now. And, it's nothing super bad, which is why I've continued to kind of operate as is, but it is something that I would like to have fixed. So anyways, so I might sound a little bit different this week, and then if it doesn't sound good, I might just go back to Audacity next week for now. But anyways, getting into the news stories, we have 3 news stories here. Yeah, 3. One's actually old, but I didn't know some information about it, so I just wanted to kind of follow up on it. But last weekend, Square Enix did a stream for the Dragon Quest, The Adventure of Dai, Infinity Strash. If you don't know, this is the 3rd game in the Adventure of Dai series of Dragon Quest games. And it is actually, I have a video up for Crossblades on the Ko-fi right now. So if you want to support me, you can go see that video. But this is the kind of 3rd-person action game kind of thing, and they've shown it off. And before it was actually more isometric when they originally showed it, but now it's kind of behind the back kind of thing. And it's interesting because what they've shown so far, at least from what I skimmed through on the stream, it seems like it's more of a mission-based game. So you kind of go around and you select missions that kind of engages fights and things like that. Where I believe that original trailer had more dungeon-y kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'm curious how it will all play out. I mean, that game's been in development for a long time, so I would not be surprised if the majority of the content in that original trailer just is not applicable anymore. But it is coming up soon in September. They're releasing it on the 28th. And it's gone, oh gosh, I don't remember how the platform's in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch, and PC. Maybe I should look that up real quick while we're talking here. But yeah, it looks kind of neat still, but I think I'm a little underwhelmed still, honestly, on it. It looks fine. I was kind of hoping it'd be a multiplayer RPG thing. But unfortunately, it looks like it's going to probably be all single player. It was interesting to see just how similar the game looked in terms of UI and things like that as that Dragon Quest arcade game that I did a video for on the Ko-fi. So it looks like it's PlayStation 5, Switch, PlayStation 4, PC, Xbox Series X, and Xbox Series S. So Xbox One is not included in there, it looks like, potentially. I'm just using the Google knowledge panel or whatever it's called right now, so I did not look too much into it. I'm actually not sure who made this. Maybe a company called Game Studio that worked on this? I don't know. Interesting, but if you don't know, the arcade one was developed by Sin Sophia, that did the Style Savvy games, so, or still is, because they're still supporting that game. So anyways, glad that's finally coming up, and I don't know, maybe I'll check it out. I've been kind of waiting to see what that thing looks like, and I would say so far it's kind of been okay at best. Staying on the Dragon Quest chain, it's been a Dragon Quest year for us here, guys. I don't know what happened, but here we are. Dragon Quest Champions is going into their pre-registration phase, so you can go ahead and pre-register if you want. There's not really any new details about it as far as I can tell, but the reason I was initially bringing this up, or it was on my news list initially, is that when I went to the Google Play page, The page was actually all in English with the exception of any of the game screenshots and things like that, which was a surprise. It wasn't like, machine translating through my browser or anything like that. So I thought maybe that was, possibly the sign that the game would be getting translated, possibly. However, I was reading the text on the page and it just kind of read weird. It read like machine translation. And I opened up in a bunch of different browsers, ones that don't have, Google Translate, readily available and integrated in, and all of them had English there and the same English. So I went ahead and snooped around at some other games, and I looked at Schoolgirl Strikers 2, which I believe does not have an English version of the game, but it is a very old game, and that page is in English as well, and it's that same kind of like broken text. So I suspect that Google is like pre-machine translating those pages if they don't have a native like language for you available on that page. So look at your region and be like, okay, you're from the US, we only have a Japanese description, so we'll just go ahead and like run this through auto translation basically. So unfortunately I don't think that actually means anything, but yeah, so I'm guessing that means that they're going to probably launch here in the next month or two coming up. So I don't know if I'll play more Dragon Quest Champions. I'll probably wait and see what that game looks like at launch. If it looks like basically the same thing, I don't know. I think the big thing for me would just be knowing how the gear rollout is, because when I played Solomon Program a long time ago, which is also was a free-to-play game with like microtransactions, today it's still playable. I need to go and like see how playable it is, but I know it's still playable, but the actual services of it are shut down. I believe you can't buy any more currency either. That game, when you went to the final release when it first came out, was very, very slow drip feed on any of the stuff that the beta was just kind of giving to you. So I'm curious if Dragon Quest Champions will have the same thing where like once they're asking for real money, they're going to start like limiting, how much that they want to get you, versus a beta test where they're just trying to get you up to speed and testing stuff, right? So I wonder if like when you play beta tests for games, if it kind of spoils you a little bit, but I'm just curious to see like how that game was rebalanced as well, because there was some things about it that were just kind of like weird with like, if one player kind of got really, really strong at the end of the match, there's kind of nothing you could do other than just kind of sit around and hope that they killed themselves somehow, which is like very rare that would ever happen. So yeah. And this last news story here was an announcement, I believe, of a new game. This happened a couple weeks ago at this point, but I didn't think too much of it other than I looked at it and thought it was cute. And there's a lot of games that like I'll look at, think it's cute, and I don't bring on the podcast because I really just don't have much to say. But in this case, it was like kind of a Games for Girls action side-scrolling platformer kind of thing. I don't know if Games for Girls is the right word, but it has a very cute aesthetic. And it's called Panic in Sweetsland. I believe it's on Steam, and I believe it has an English page as well. I'll pull that up here as well. But so it looks like it got like translated if I recall correctly. But what I was not aware of was I just tried to pull up the thing and it didn't show up. Let me try. But what I was not aware of is the developer for this game is the same developer who worked on the what's that game called? I'm blanking on the name. Like I didn't write the name because I was like, oh, you know what the name of that game is. All right, I finally found the name. The developer who made Waku Waku Sweets, which was a I believe like some kind of puzzle game on the Switch, if I recall correctly. I actually talked to, or maybe it's more like a Cookie Mama game, with more of like a cutesy Japanese girl or anime girl kind of look versus Cookie Mama kind of thing. So we actually talked about that when I was talking to Pokey Puff. She recommended that game on the show. But yeah, these are the developers of that, and the game very much looks like it, but I just didn't really make that connection when I initially saw it. Like even the mascot is the same. So it is like a side-scrolling hack and slash style game with like a cooking element to it seems like, or cooking theme to it. So it looks cute, although I would say it looks fairly budget overall. I would not exactly call it like great looking, but I think it looks like good enough for what it is and what it's trying to do. So I'm just like clicking around a ton this podcast trying to pull up stuff. Poorly researched podcast this week, even though I had barely anything to do. I'm just sitting here looking at stuff on the fly. I wanted to just make sure that I was right about it looking kind of cheap from what I remember, because it's been like 2 weeks since I actually looked at the game. It looks fine. Yeah, I don't know. Look, indie games of today don't need to look fantastic. It looks good and fitting for what it's trying to be. So, anyways, that's it for our news this week. And then we're gonna go into this is the segues. This show is full of adventurous segues that do not exist apparently. We're gonna go into Jillian's question. So Jillian supports us on Ko-fi, so she gets to ask us questions. Jillian asks, if Wii Fit walked so Ring Fit could run, should they do the same for something like Brain Age? Which, if I recall correctly, I think there was a Brain Age game on the Switch, and I have no idea how it did, but given the fact that I never heard anything about it sales-wise, I don't think it ever really turned into anything. So it seems like they tried. And honestly, if you asked me at the beginning of the Switch era, if you brought back fitness for Nintendo, would it be the smart move? I don't know if I would say yes. But I think, honestly, I could be wrong about this. And here, remember our favorite segment, video game fan fiction, development fan fiction? Here's my video game development fan fiction. Nintendo of America published Fitness Boxing in the US, if I recall correctly. And that did incredibly well. And part of me, the gap between Fitness Boxing 1 and Ring Fit feels big enough that if it didn't inform Ring Fit coming out, I think it at least supported Ring Fit eventually coming out, right? And I believe honestly that is it Image Pooch, I think is their name or whatever, Image Pock. It's Quest 64 developers, if I remember correctly. They I think they did kind of pave the way for that a little bit. I don't know if Nintendo would have dipped their toes into that. Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong. It's been interesting to see Nintendo kind of try to revitalize some of these Wii series and DS series stuff, right? And it's been interesting to see what succeeded. And I think in the case of, Ring Fit, it obviously benefited from the pandemic. And also Clubhouse Games also benefited from the pandemic. I don't know, what led to the decision of them putting out Clubhouse Games. And making it go through development, but I think those both games, because Clubhouse Games has a bunch of board games you can play online. I think both of those games benefited immensely from that whole situation. But obviously they're in development before that situation as well. So, but I think at the very least, Fitness Boxing at least gave a positive sign to Nintendo that something like Ring Fit could work today. So. What do you need for Brain Age to work? I mean, obviously, you could just look at maybe what Ring Fit did and then kind of apply something like that to Brain Age, right? Make your brain training game more of a video game, right? Make it something that feels less like a, health software and make it feel more like, something you play. And I mean, Brain Age has fun things in it, but at least the original one I played, I haven't played the rest of them. The original one, though, kind of has a very plain look that's very intentionally plain, and it feels in the same way that it's set up in a book mode. I think it's meant to feel like you have a book open in front of you, a crossword puzzle or something like that printed on a page, and I think it's supposed to kind of replicate that feel a little bit. Now there's some exceptions of where they use color with the red, blue, green, yellow kind of stuff or whatever with the speaking. But I think you would need to kind of maybe facelift it. And maybe, in the same way that Ring Fit isn't, Wii Fit, maybe Brain Age is something else, right? In some ways, I feel like Big Brain Academy is that, though. And they did try Big Brain Academy on the Wii or the Switch, and I don't think it really succeeded either. But maybe that game's just not game enough, right? I never played the Big Brain Academy on the Switch, unfortunately. I have the DS and the Wii one, and so I think I just kind of passed it by because I need to play those before I try to bother with them. And honestly, at this point, I probably should just sit down and start doing those because those are daily games you play, right, for brief periods of time. So it's not something that you really focus on. So maybe it's something good to get in a habit of just doing. Otherwise, when else am I going to do it, right? It's not like those games are something that you find the right time in your life for. I feel like they're just things that you're supposed to work into your life. So, I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. But, obviously we could look at, Ring Fit and say what worked there and try to apply something like that and see if that works. Doraemon did something similar to that fairly recently. I forget when that game came out, but I actually was kind of maybe, I don't know if I was keeping an eye out for that game, but I was like cognizant of it. And when I would see Doraemon games on the Switch, I would definitely look at them to see if it was the one. But that's the one where you do Brain Age puzzles and it like does damage in RPG sense. So I don't know how that game did, but given it's a Doraemon game, I mean, imagine it probably hit like some level of license sales in Japan, but like how much of that is like a indicator to Nintendo that like you can produce something like that and get like a large scale sales success. I don't know, but Clubhouse Games is probably the closest thing that they've had to something like that more recently. So I'd be curious to see them try something. And I feel like that's one of those things that Nintendo would try, right? I feel like that today they've had enough of the past use case with that kind of stuff that it makes sense. But, yeah, I don't know. I think you really, because of the fact that like, mobile phones are what they are today in terms of like how people check in with things and like how they bring stuff around. I think, you would need something with a bit more novelty in the way that like, you can't play Ring Fit on your phone, right? That's just like that experience. Obviously you could find some way to translate that experience, but Nintendo specifically made a specific, very well designed, thing. I assume it's based off something in real life you do exercises with, fitness ring, right? And then just like was like this can work with what technology we have right now. So what makes that experience happen on the Switch for Brain Age? What makes it an experience you can only go to the Switch for? And fitness training, I think, makes a lot of sense in terms of movement and what it's trying to get you to do. I think Clubhouse Games makes a lot of sense in terms of like online playing with friends, but maybe it's just like the particular target audience. And I don't think Clubhouse Games sold nearly as well as like Wii Fit. Ring Fit. Trying to get all these names straight. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I provided any insight on that. And if I was in Nintendo trying to answer that question, I think it'd be a very hard question to answer, honestly, which probably is why we haven't seen anything since. But yeah, I remember that Brain Age thing on Switch getting announced, and I assume it came out in the US. I don't know if it came out on physical, but I assume it came out in the US at some point. Because I remember at the time it was like, oh, this got announced for Japan and Europe, and there's been no US announcement. And it was like a really weird thing at the time that like the US didn't get an announcement for a Switch game immediately. But I think shortly after they announced it. But I think maybe it was like physical in Japan and Europe, but not in the US or something like that. I am like pulling garbage out of my head right now. So if you're like, Ben's talking facts, no, I'm not. I'm talking garbage out of my brain right now. So do your research if you want to buy some Brain Age on the Switch and figure out what's going on there. But was there some kind of like IR pointer part to Brain Age on the Switch? I'm starting to remember that like someone's holding a Joy-Con and then like posing their fingers in front of the IR camera. Oh man, brain is working. I don't know. I probably should try that at some point, but I have enough of those things sitting around that, like I said, I just need to work those into my life right now. I need to hook my DS back up and stuff because I have a couple of those kind of games on the DS I want to mess with, and it would be good to just have the DS here and ready to go because then I can capture it as well. Just hooked up. I kind of just put everything away when I went to Japan because I didn't want my cat wasn't here actually. So actually that's flawed logic. Why did I put it away? Who knows? I put it away and I have not taken it back out, but I was cleaning up my desk and stuff like that before I left. So I kind of put stuff away, and the 3DS was one of those things I just kind of put away and didn't like hook back up over here once I got back. So anyways, that's it for news and Jillian's question. Thank you again, Jillian, for supporting us. Again, if you want to support me on Ko-fi, you can do so. And there's currently two paid videos there. Give me money. For Chase Chokers, the arcade game. I did a casual review for that, and also Dragon Quest Dai, the Adventure of Dai Crossblades. Those are two Japanese arcade games that I played in Japan. At some point, those will be free on the main OCP Plus YouTube channel, but or not the OCP Plus YouTube channel. I need to rename that channel probably because I think it's confusing that there's a main One Control Port channel and there's a OCP Plus channel. And, technically, if you know what OCP stands for, it's weird when I say OCP when I might mean the main channel. So I think I need to rename that other channel. I had a name idea, but I decided to use that name for something else. So I'm going to have to figure out something. I've considered just calling it straight up like the Ben Zone because honestly, it doesn't really matter. Like the less I care about the OCP Plus channel, I think the healthier of a channel it's going to be for me in terms of just like not stressing over stuff being on there ASAP and stuff like that. and just kind of putting stuff out as it makes sense. So there's a couple of things that are still left over from like when I started this year. I was like pre-planning a bunch of content for OCP Plus. So you might see a couple of those things show up. But right now, really what I've been focusing on is just, the reviews I've been doing that have been showing up on the Ko-fi, and moving those over to OCP Plus when it's ready. And then also I've been doing the podcast highlights over there. But I've been trying to pick older podcast highlights when possible. So at least if, you're seeing me posting those videos and stuff, it will feel a bit more fresher because I'm not immediately talking about it on the podcast, then next week showing up and being like, oh, here's a video of that exact same audio, or not exact same, edited down audio of that podcast, and then some gameplay. So Asphalt Urban GT is coming up at some point, and I'm really happy with that podcast highlight, actually. So I think I plan to still keep doing those because I think it's good to talk about some games on the podcast in depth, and then just kind of leave that as like when I'm ready later, I'll edit some video, but I'm not like, it's not like Chase Joker's or Dragon Quest Die Crossblade where like I want to get that out fairly quickly kind of thing. So anyways, speaking of YouTube garbage, I want to talk a little bit about the featured videos and stuff. So if you don't know, Babylon's Fall was the last video. It's a long video, about 40 minutes long. I got a little, I've talked about this before, but I got kind of mixed feedback on, well, everyone liked the Babylon's Fall video. Nobody told me they did not like it. But I did get a little bit mixed feedback on topic stuff and length. Specifically, there's a lot of topics in one video, and also the video is very long. And because I jump between games at times, sometimes they're not fully paying attention, which I think is part of the long thing as well. But like not fully paying attention, they'll look back and they don't really know where I'm at because they weren't able to tune out for a particular period of time and then kind of tune back in immediately. So again, none of them said it was bad videos, just that was some hiccups they ran into. And then I've had other people say that they love the length and love the mix of topics. So I kind of got all the feedback. So the reality is probably I'm not going to worry too much about any of the feedback directly. I'm going to kind of focus on things that I think work because generally at this point, the sample size of the pool of people who are talking to me is so small that like if everybody has different thoughts and opinions on it and conflicting thoughts and opinions, at this point, I don't know. I feel like it's probably not worth like stressing too much over. So I'm not specifically going out of my way to make longer videos, I will say. I mean, the Babylon's Fall video alone was just really challenging to do. So, when possible, I'm going to stick to the approach I have had, where I try my best to keep things as trimmed down as possible. And Babylon's Fall, I did that as well. But, I want to make sure that the things I'm saying in a video support the argument and doesn't feel like completely out of whack. But I want to also make a little bit more wiggle room as well, just to make sure that, that I'm not cutting out certain things. So I've been working on that Xeno video. That's really a Somabringer video in disguise. And I've been playing around with it a lot, and I was very unhappy with it for a while, but I did get some stuff in there that I was like, does this need to be here? Not really, but it does prove a point, and it proves a point in a fun way. So I just kind of left it there in that regard. And like, yes, it's a little weird that it's there, but it's also kind of emphasizes just how weird this topic is in the first place when I talk about it, or the weird approach I have to this topic. So I think makes a lot of sense. So I am trying to find the balance of that. But there is stuff like, at the beginning of the video, like I'm really trying to build this video in a way that if you have not played Xeno games and stuff, you can watch it and you'll be fine. And you'll get through it and maybe you'll learn something. Because like part of the problem I have with Xeno is that I feel like maybe the perception of it is not always the best when it comes to people who are not a part of that series. I think people look at it and like, this is kind of a big giant universe that I'll never understand. And I don't think that's like a good way to look at the series, honestly. But I think a lot of people claim the series as that. And I previously in the past have probably as well. So in some ways doing a little bit of redemption there. But, I don't want to bore, Xeno fans with like 10, 15 minute explainer of what the Xeno franchise is. And, for people who aren't, interested in Xeno, I think the first thing they're interested in is like, where are you going with this conversation? Not, are you going to give me a history lesson on Xeno? Because there are so many videos out there that already do that and do that better than me. So I don't want to be a Xeno history lesson. I want to give you the information you need to know to understand my point, right? And it would be better to get in the details, or maybe I wouldn't say it would be better. It would be helpful to get in the details, but I have to ask the question of, is it actually something that's going to benefit the listener? And I think a lot of times the answer is no. So I ended up kind of cutting down and like really simplifying the explanation of Xenogears and Xenosaga and saying, this is kind of the view of it. This is kind of the reality of it. And then here's how I feel about it, but in very compact forms. But it's really just a way to get me to Summonbringer and talking about what I like about Summonbringer. So, because I think why I like Summonbringer so much relies heavily on how I feel about the Xeno franchise, honestly, thinking about it. But yeah, I think, or at least it is very connected. And why I think Summonbringer stands out compared to other Monolith Soft games is very heavily dependent, I think, on how Summonbringer feels compared to a Xeno game. So that's kind of what the video is focusing on. But the big problem I was trying to tackle in it was, and this is true maybe for all my videos. So I think a lot of people and I think maybe on the podcast, if you guys listen to the podcast regularly, you might get more of this directly. But I think a lot of people will be like, oh, you're so positive about everything all the time. But I don't always start positive about things. And sometimes I am kind of frustrated by something or angry about something, but I have to talk through it to get to where I feel like I understand why I'm angry about it and then realize whether or not that's true or it's not. So there are a lot of things about the Xeno series that frustrate me. And if you listen to the Xeno stuff, you probably already know what a lot of that stuff is. But it is not just because those things in the games frustrate me, don't mean they're bad things. And I think that doesn't mean that they're always bad. And it depends on what you think you're looking at, what you're looking at in terms of what is bad. Are you talking about games? And in the case of the Xeno franchise, I think a lot of the stuff I get frustrated by is stuff that a lot of the fan base likes, and asking the question, why does the fan base like this? And not, demeaning them, right? Not saying, well, I disagree, therefore I think your opinion's stupid, right? And it's never that straightforward on the script or something like that, but there's definitely times where I have written a sentence and I look at them that's just a really rough sentence, and it's not a nice sentence, and it kind of overly blames a group of people within the Xeno, base and things like that. And I feel this bad way about PC Engine stuff sometimes when I talk about PCFX, which is I'm just going to blame PC Engine people all the time. I shouldn't do that. But it is good shorthand to be oh, this is kind of what we're trying to push back against, is this PC Engine view of the PCFX in terms of the Western import scene. But it's not a healthy way to say that stuff. And so obviously when I'm talking on the podcast, it's a little bit more loose, and sometimes that stuff gets out. And usually I try to turn around and correct myself whenever possible. When I had a little spiel about Xenosaga in the ranking video, and then the podcast after I came back is hey, I feel bad about how I talked about Xenosaga. The podcast is that podcast and it's done. But, I feel bad about it. So let me at least, kind of lighten my language a little bit. And ultimately, I think that led to not only this video I'm making, but also, me revisiting it, because I realized that the problems I have with Xenosaga were problems that I didn't necessarily know were true or not. And while I think ultimately the problems I have with Xenosaga were true, how they were true were different, and I had to kind of readjust that. So I think this week there's going to be the ranking video that is going to go up on Ko-fi, where I rank Future Redeemed, the DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, as well as re-ranking Xenosaga. And then I also put Future Connected on that list as well, which is something I just kept forgetting to do, because Future Connected is kind of a weird thing. It doesn't really stand alone as much as Future Redeemed and Torn of the Golden Country. But given just where it's positioned in that series, I just think it's worth ranking on its own, because it's kind of its own little experience still. So that's coming up. That's going to go out on Wednesday, probably this week, on the Ko-fi. So again, if you're a supporter for that, you can go ahead and watch that video starting this week when it goes up. So on Wednesday, probably. That's my guess, is when it'll go up on Wednesday. I'm just manually pushing those out. So, it kind of just goes out whenever I feel like it. Ko-fi, unless you pay money, doesn't let you schedule posts. So it's just kind of when I think about it is basically what happens. So anyways, but yeah. And so I guess all that stuff, kind of comes back to asking the question, a problem that I've had with working on the Xeno videos. Sometimes I'm like, what's the point of this? Because I'm kind of pushing back against Xeno fans. And then also, I think my audience is not that interested in what I have to say about the Xeno franchise sometimes. I think me liking Monolith Soft is something that is a very personal thing. And I don't necessarily know if anybody following me cares about that. Maybe like Renoa. Renoa is like the one person I know who like actively comments on those things. So, and I guess Lux as well. Lux also comments on it too. But like, I don't know how many people, I mean, obviously I'm a lot of things to a lot of different people. So like, I think that's always true with my content, unfortunately, just because of how I am, and like how I can't advertise the channel properly. But it did kind of put me in this position where like the things I'm saying in the Xeno video are in the direction of where I want to take the channel as a whole, right? And the Babylon's Fall video are in the direction of where I want to take the video as a whole. But I have this kind of vision of like what a video looks like on my channel going forward. But when I look at that vision, and I have not done it yet, which is the thing, I really just need to sit down and do it. But when I look at that vision of what that video is, I worry that it's going to be a little too cookie cutter. But in some ways, I think that's not a bad thing because it will help keep consistency. But I don't think these videos would be as, passionate as the Bunny Mission Bond videos, as the Xeno video, and the Babylon's Fall video. I think they would be a bit more, bit more standardized and maybe a bit less me in it in some ways. I mean, it will be me, but I worry that it will be something that will be a bit more like cold and calculated maybe. So I think I just need to make those videos still and see how they look. But like, I think part of the reason I haven't worked on them yet is that because I kind of foresee that being a problem, I kind of am like, I'd rather work on the thing that I feel passionate about working on right now. The Xeno video, which, don't necessarily know if anybody actually is interested in that. But I hope, like I said, I'm trying my best to make it something that everybody can watch and listen to. And I hope it's something that if you don't know about the Xeno franchise, you can kind of appreciate the message at the very end of it all. And also, you'll learn about Somabringer. That's kind of the big thing is like it is technically a Somabringer video. So if you're interested in learning about Somabringer on the Nintendo DS, which is, just a cool Diablo, well, I say cool, I have problems with it, but there are things I like a lot about it. But it is a lot of like very Ben problems, like Monolith Soft games. It is a very like Diablo 2 style game though. So if you're into like Diablo 2 and you're excited to play games like Diablo 2, I think Somabringer will work pretty well for you. So at the very least, you'll get that like view of what Somabringer is, even if you have to skip past the whole first part of the video where I talk about the Xeno series. But the context I'm talking about Somabringer really is in the Xeno series in a lot of ways. So, but I do give the little rundown of like what this game is, how it functions, what makes it interesting, things like that. I do that just because like even a lot of Monolith Soft and Xeno fans have not played Somabringer. Weirdly enough, it is one of the most Xeno-style Monolith Soft games, yet it seems like nobody in that fan base really played it, maybe just because it's not called Xenobringer, right? Like, which maybe is like against the whole argument of my video of just like, I always say, like, I always want new franchise and new IP from Xeno, right? This is not so much that argument, but it is kind of in that vein in some ways, so... Anyways, I'm going to wrap that up. Thanks again for coming. OneController.com is the website. Like I said, 2 videos up on Ko-fi now if you want to support. There'll be a 3rd one this week. I'll probably put out one of those public sometime the next month or so. I don't know which one yet. So, but those videos will be there. If you want to check them out, it's only $1 to support me. So I would appreciate it if you want to do that. Otherwise, I think that's going to be it. Thanks for coming. And I hope you guys have a great week. Bye.